A very good morning to all the respected dignitaries present here. This is Mridul, faculties of Siddhartha Institute of Pharmacy, Dehradun. I feel an immense pleasure to call upon our respected speaker, Dr. Miki Lee, Assistant Professor at Nottingham University, Malaysia. Today's topic is on the use of medicinal mushroom for airway disease. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Miki Lee for her engrossing lecture. Over to you, ma'am.
Great. Thank you very much, Miss Indu, for the introduction. Could you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am. Your
Thank
voice is
you.
audible.
All right, so let me share my screen first. So good afternoon, everyone from Malaysia. So first, I would like to thank Siddhartha Institute of Pharmacy and also my colleague, Dr. Mohamed Tahil Ansari, for inviting me to share my research area in this webinar. Very happy to meet researchers from other fields as well. So I'm Maki and I'm currently teaching pharmacology and physiology in the School of Pharmacy in the University of Nottingham, Malaysia campus. So later, I will walk you through the backgrounds on the medicinal mushrooms and airway diseases, and then I will share some evidence that supports the use of mushrooms in treating the airway diseases. So I will show you how mushrooms are positioned in the traditional and modern medicine. So to clarify, I'm actually not a mycologist, so I do not specialize in the study of mushroom anatomy or their genetic information. Instead, I'm trained as a pharmacologist, but my research interest lies in the pharmacological properties of natural products. So mushroom is one of my interests. So I believe everyone is very familiar with mushroom in our daily life. It's part of the diet for many Asian people. So just a brief introduction. So mushroom belongs to the macrofungi, to the fungi kingdom. So it's known as a macrofungi because it's a fungi that is large enough to be seen by the naked eyes. And most of the mushrooms belong to the division of Basidiomycota, and some of them belong to the Ascomycota division, depending on the location of their spores formation. And following that, the class, order, family, genus, and the species of the mushroom will vary depending on the type of the mushroom. So basically, the type the mushroom is actually their fruiting body will grow above the ground that contains the spore for the reproduction purpose, and part of the mushroom will remain underground that forms a network of hyphae. From where I stopped, yeah. So part of the mushroom remains underground with a network of the hyphae, which is called the mycelium. So this mycelium is basically the food store of the mushroom that contains all the nutrients needed for the mushroom's survival. And the mushroom will feed on complex organic materials stored in the dead or living tissues of plants and animals. The growth of the mushroom is affected by a number of factors, which includes the light. So the growth of the mushroom's fruiting body does require a dim light. The mushroom can grow in a large variation, in a large temperature range. That means different types of mushroom can grow from the tropical to the temperate region. The mushroom also prefer a high humidity level in the environment. And the growing medium of the mushroom will affect how the mushroom looks like. So the mushroom that grows in the wild and the mushroom that grows as a cultivated type, they will differ in their appearance because the growing medium which is used for the growth is different as well. So up to 5.1 million species of mushroom exist on Earth, but only 2 to 3% is known by the human. The species diversity is much greater in the tropical regions compared to the temperate region, but nowadays many mushrooms has adapted to live in both tropical as well as the temperate regions. So there is a advance in the mushroom cultivation technology, and this results in mushroom being a horticultural crop in many countries. That means people produce mushroom for food as well as for medicinal benefits. Right, so at the same time, mushroom is also a delicious cuisine. So I believe everyone will like mushroom. If you don't like it, probably you are an anomaly. Just kidding. So some of the common mushrooms that is commonly consumed by people are the white button mushroom, which contributes to the largest mushroom cultivation industry, and followed by the shiitake mushroom, the oyster mushroom, as well as the golden needle mushroom, which is very commonly consumed by people as an ingredient in the steamboat. So the mushroom is a good substitute for meat because it contains a rich source of protein as well as fibers and some antioxidants. It's also very low in the calorie. So mushroom is also known as a nutraceuticals. So basically nutraceuticals combine the terms of nutrition as well as pharmaceuticals. So it refers to a food that has both the nutrition value and also the medicinal benefit. So the major constituents of the mushroom is water, followed by proteins, carbohydrates, and dietary fiber, and a small amount of fat and ash also present in the mushrooms. The mushroom is also contains a number of the vital nutrients, which is essential for the human's living. Right, so if we look at the value of the world mushroom industry, so in 2013, the medicinal mushrooms actually contributed to about 24 billions out of 63 billions of the whole world mushroom industry. So medicinal mushroom is gaining more popularity in the recent decades because people believe that there is a benefit, there's a medicinal benefit with the mushroom, and they believe that natural products is safer and safer than the modern medicine. So the primary contribution of the medicinal mushroom is from Asia Pacific, both in terms of the consumption as well as the cultivation of the mushrooms. Right. So following that, I will focus on medicinal mushrooms, which is defined as a macroscopic fungi which is used in the form of extracts or powder for prevention, alleviation, or healing of multiple diseases, and in balancing a healthy diet. So it has a long history of use as a medicine in various countries, mainly in the China and Japan, Mexico, and many other countries. So perhaps you can also share what is the traditional mushrooms which is used in India for treatment of diseases. So it's deemed as a natural source in prevention and treatment of diseases. So from the traditional use, moving to the scientific evidence. So in the scientific experiments, there is up to 125 medicinal properties being reported. So most of these scientific studies on medicinal mushrooms actually focus on the anti-tumor properties and also the immunomodulatory properties of the mushrooms. Other studies, they also investigate the antioxidants, antiviral, and antibacterial properties of the mushrooms and many other diseases. So there is a large potential for this medicinal mushroom that is yet to be unraveled. Okay, so before we can use the medicinal mushrooms to test in the scientific experiments, we have to go through a series of processes. So first of all, we need to collect the mushroom either from the wild or from the cultivation. So once the mushroom sample is obtained, we will need to authenticate it. So we need to identify whether it belongs to the correct species. So there are a few methods of authentication, which is by microscopic examination of the mushroom morphology or the anatomy. A more accurate way of identification of the mushroom is by molecular identification, which is using the DNA markers. The other method is by using the chemical fingerprint of the mushrooms. So we can use the spectroscopy and chromatography in doing the chemical fingerprint for the mushrooms. So once the mushroom is identified, then we will extract the mushroom. So we can grind it into the powders, can dissolve the mushroom in organic solvents with different polarity, water, and the mixtures. So depending on the extracts that we want to isolate, so depending on the components that we are interested in, so we can use different types of the solvents to extract the mushrooms. And following that, there will be a production of crude extract with a mixture of compounds. So if we are interested in further identifying the bioactive compounds in the mushrooms, we can then go through fractionation or compound purification of the mushroom crude extracts. So this will further fractionate the mushroom extracts, for example, by the molecular weight, or we can isolate the compound of interest by liquid chromatography methods. Okay. So next, I would like to briefly talk about the chronic respiratory diseases. So I would like to focus on chronic respiratory diseases because it's one of the major types of non-communicable diseases recognized by the World Health Organization. So non-communicable diseases basically means the disease is not able to be transmitted between one person to another. So it's defined by the WHO as a disease that affects the airway and other structures of the lung in a long-term matter. So asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease are two of the main diseases which is focused by the WHO, and it actually kills up to 4 million of people every year as of 2021. So both asthma and COPD, they are characterized by two features, the limited lung airflow as well as airway inflammation. So the limited lung airflow is due to the contraction of the airway smooth muscle in response to the stimuli, such as the pollution, the dust, cold air or exercise, and so on. So this is associated with the overactivation of muscarinic receptors in the airway smooth muscle. And at the same time, the airway inflammation will occur as well. So this will eventually lead to airway remodeling with structural change to the lung tissues, as well as airway hyperresponsiveness with increased sensitivity or reactivity towards the stimuli. So the majority of the airway contraction and the inflammation will happens in the lower airways, which is in the bronchus, deep inside the lung. So some of the symptoms related to asthma and COPD are the breathing difficulty due to the limited lung airflow, chronic cough, wheezing, and mucus production. Okay, so the current mainstays of treatment for asthma and COPD is the use of bronchodilators as a prevention to relax the airway smooth muscle, and also the use of anti-inflammatory drug. So the first line is the inhaled corticosteroids, and there are also other types of drugs which can help to suppress the inflammation in the airway, which could improve the disease prognosis. So the issues with this treatment is that, first of all, if there is side effects, okay, so the side effects that actually occurs are mainly related to the corticosteroids, which is used as a regular medicine in the asthma and COPD patients. And there's also a fear among people for the use of steroids. So people who are fear of the side effects, or if the side effects does occur in these patients, they will eventually become non-compliant towards the medication. And there's also a development of tolerance towards some medications in these patients when they have to use these drugs for a period of time. And eventually, there is an issue of ineffectiveness of some of these drugs in a certain subset of the asthma and COPD patients as well. So because of this, in view of this issue, there's a need to develop, to search for an alternative drug as a new drug to target the chronic respiratory diseases, or use as an adjunct drug in addition with the bronchodilators and the anti-inflammatory drug in the current therapy. So next, I will show you the traditional and modern use of medicinal mushrooms in the airway diseases. Right, so the first mushroom that I would like to show is Lacriciformis officinalis. So this is a mushroom that has a very long history of use. So there's great physician has recorded the thought use of this mushroom in treating consumption. So consumption is an ancient term for tuberculosis. So it doesn't really look like the conventional mushroom that you will see nowadays. The next mushroom is Ganoderma lucidum, and this one is probably more famous to among most of the people. So it's a very well-established medicinal mushrooms in the Chinese traditional medicine, and it's being used by some of the Asian countries as well. In Chinese, it's known as lingzhi. So it has been used as a general health tonic, along with the benefits which is anti-fatigue, anti-aging, anti-asthmatic, and anti-tussive as well. So we can see that there is some traditional use to relieve the airway inflammation and also the airway contraction for these mushrooms. So this is a traditional use for Ganoderma lucidum. So there is also some scientific evidence for this mushroom. So this mushroom has been administered in vitro and in vivo experiment in a formula which is known as the ASHME formula. So this ASHME formula, it also contains other type of the herbs in the capsule, and then it's administered to the animal model. It actually shows that it reduced the inflammatory cytokines. It also reduced acetylcholine-induced increase in the airway resistance. So basically, it means that it helps to open up the airway and reduce the limitation in the airflow. And in an in vitro experiment, it also shows that it can relax the tracheal rings, which is contracted with acetylcholine. So there's a mixture of evidence in vitro and in vivo. Apart from that, there's also some crude extracts, some studies that use the crude extract of Ganoderma lucidum, or use the ethyl acetate fractions or the triterpenes isolated from the Ganoderma lucidum that has shown to inhibit antigen-induced histamine release from the red mast cells. So one of the process that happens during the airway inflammation is mast cell degranulation that leads to the histamine release as well as other inflammatory cytokines release from the mast cells. So with the evidence that it can inhibit the histamine release from the mast cells, it could potentially has the anti-inflammatory response in airway diseases as well. Okay. So other mushrooms which are documented for alleviating the asthma and cough symptoms include Cordyceps sinensis. So this is quite popular in Tibet as well. So it's called the winter worm saber grass. That means that the fungi will grow out of a worm. It will infect the worm, paralyze the worm, and then it will grow out of the worm. So eventually it becomes a mushroom. So this is one of the mushrooms which is traditionally used to alleviate asthma and also cough symptoms. And there's other mushrooms, for example, the Corylus versicolor. It looks a bit like the Ganoderma lucidum that has shown in previous slide. And the Tremella mesenterica, which is a jelly fungus. So all of these also have documented use for alleviating asthma or cough symptoms. So although these mushrooms has traditional use in respiratory diseases, there is no scientific evidence that supports the use for these two mushrooms yet. There is, however, some evidence that shows the use of Cordyceps sinensis in treating airway diseases. So in a clinical trial, the asthmatic patients on treatment with the regular inhaled corticosteroid and the long-acting beta-2 adrenergic agonist has shown that the capsules containing the Cordyceps sinensis has significantly reduced the asthma exacerbation and clinical symptoms in the patient. It also improves the health-related quality of life and also reduce their inflammation markers. So this is some of the scientific evidence in the asthmatic patients in the clinical trial. Our research group also has done some in vitro study with the Cordyceps sinensis. So we find that the Cordyceps sinensis can relax carbacal contracted airway smooth muscle in the rat airway tissues. However, there's only very preliminary work done, and then we will need to do further work to investigate the mechanism of action and to find out the bioactive components. So next is the Cordyceps militaris. So this mushroom is a species similar to the Cordyceps sinensis that I showed before. So it also infects the worm, and then it will grow out of the worm to become the fungus. So there are a number of studies that actually shows that these militaris, their extract or the fractions can actually reduce the release of the inflammatory cytokines from the red basophil cells. So this is actually reflecting the mast cell degranulation in the human's body, and the aqueous extract also increase the airway, enlarge the airway, and therefore it will reduce the airway resistance. So the cordyceps, which is a quite famous compound isolated from the Cordyceps species, it also shows that it reduced the level of IgE and inflammatory cytokines in the mice and attenuated the lung inflammation in the mice. So apart from this, there are some other compounds which is isolated from Cordyceps militaris, also reduce the beta-hexosaminidase from the rat basophil cells. So again, this is done in vitro. So next, this is the golden needle mushrooms. It looks a little bit different from the cultivated golden needle mushroom because this is grown in the wild. So this golden needle mushroom is also known as Flammulina velotypes scientifically. One of the famous compound, which is known as the fungal immunomodulatory protein, which is FIP-FVE, isolated from this mushroom, has also shown in mice that the levels of the inflammatory cytokines, leukocytes, and the IgE will reduce. It also attenuates the lung inflammation in the mice and reduce the airway resistance in the mice as well. Okay, so after this, I would like to focus on my research interest. So my research group has been studying the effect of Lignosus Rhinoceros in the airway tissues. Lignosus Rhinoceros is also known as tiger milk mushroom in Malaysia. So it got the name because the legend among the indigenous people in Malaysia, they believe that the mushroom will grow out of the spot where the tiger drip its milk on the ground. So if you cut open the mycelium, so this is the food store of the mushroom, you will find that it appears to be whitish. So this mushroom is woody and it's very hard. So normally what people do is that they will grind the mushrooms and then they will add hot water and drink the powder. So just to share the history of the Lignosus Rhinoceros, so the history of the use can be dated back to 1664. It's being used by indigenous people in Southeast Asia. So not only Malaysia, it also includes the southern China and some areas in the Indonesia to treat incurable diseases, including the tuberculosis. So only until 2009, okay, when there is a successful cultivation of this mushroom in agar solid and spore media, that we can actually use it for scientific experiments in large scales. And by survey, it shows that it is the most common mushroom which is used by majority of the aborigines in the peninsular Malaysia. And one interesting thing is that the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, Tun Mahathir Mohamad, he also gave testimonial about this mushroom, is that it has helped to relieve his chronic cough. So in 2010, this mushroom has been added into the traditional medicine active ingredient list by the Malaysia Pharmaceutical Board. So up to date, there has been a couple of scientific evidence on these mushrooms, mainly focus on their anti-proliferative properties, their anti-inflammatory properties, and so on. However, there's no study done to actually investigate whether this mushroom can be used to help airway diseases or not. Despite that, the main use of Lignosus rhinoceros among the aborigines is actually to treat asthma and chronic cough. So in 2018, we actually show that the Lignosus rhinoceros extract, they actually relax the airway smooth muscle as well as the vascular smooth muscle. So another group in Malaysia from the University of Science Malaysia, they actually use hot water extract and they test in the rat model with airway inflammation, and it shows that it reduced the levels of IgE and inflammatory cytokines. It also shows that it attenuates the lung inflammation in the rat model. So what our group did is that we contracted the airway tissues with carbachol, and then we add the cold water extract of the mushroom, and then we find that it's actually relaxed the airway tissues up to 100%. And then further to that, we try to isolate the active components. So what we did is that we fractionate the extract by molecular weight, and then we found that high and medium molecular weight fractions, which are high in protein and protein saccharide complex, are actually bioactive, and the low molecular weight fractions, which doesn't have the protein, they are actually unable to relax the airway tissues. So this leads to the hypothesis is that whether protein and the protein polysaccharide complex in the mushroom can actually help to relax the airway smooth muscle. So our project is that we will isolate the proteins from the mushroom extract and to further test whether it is the bioactive compound. So we also did some mechanistic study, and then we found that the mushroom extract actually inhibits calcium influx through the membrane calcium channels. So as you may know, the airway smooth muscle contraction is due to the influx of calcium ion into the smooth muscle cells that leads to the contraction. So when the co-water extract inhibits the calcium channels on the membrane, it inhibits the calcium influx, and it could lead to the airway smooth muscle relaxation. Okay, so one of the important concerns about the mushroom extract, whether it works or not, is to find out the potential bioactive components and do a further test on it. So as I mentioned about this just now, it could be the protein or the protein polysaccharide complex from the Lignosus Rhinoceros. Some other compounds from mushroom, for example, the alkaloids, tritopenoids, and the fungal immunomodulatory proteins, they also have scientific evidence that they can relax the airway smooth muscle. So this can be the compounds of interest as well that can contribute to the bioactivity in relieving the airway diseases. So these bioactive components is mainly isolated from the fruiting bodies, the mycelium, and also the culture broth of the mushroom. So up to date, majority of the studies have been done with crude extracts or the mixture with other ingredients in the formulation. So it's challenging to identify the bioactive compound and to purify them to test in the airway tissues. So the potentials for the medicinal mushroom is that it's a natural product. Okay, and the natural product has a long history of use in the community. It has a rich source of pharmacologically active novel substances that has been prompting the discovery of the new drugs. And due to the dissatisfaction with conventional medicine, so a lot of problems associated, like I shared just now, the side effects, the tolerance, ineffectiveness, and also the long-term disease with poor prognosis. So people prone to look for an alternative medicine, and some of them actually perceive that natural products are more beneficial and safer. So I put a question mark here because when most people, they think that natural products are safe, but without a proper safety profile being established, then we cannot really say that it is actually safe for use and for consumption for a long term. So there's also an emerging scientific evidence on this mushroom, mostly on the anti-inflammatory properties, with some evidence of direct airway relaxation effect, as I showed just now. So this could means that the mushroom has a potential for relieving the airway diseases. So link it to the popular topic right now. So medicinal mushrooms has actually reported antiviral properties and anti-inflammatory properties, and it has shown to reduce inflammatory cytokines in some studies. So could it be potential to help to attenuate the cytokine storm associated with the COVID-19, or whether it can help to relieve the symptoms associated with the COVID-19? It's a lot of potential there, but more studies is needed. Okay, so some of the challenges associated with the mushroom is that there's a lack of regulation of use. So there will be a need to evaluate the efficacy and safety to establish the therapeutic dose. So although mushroom, we have been using it, as in we have been consuming it for food or for medicinal purposes, but we have to establish a therapeutic dose which is safe for long-term use. And without this regulation of use, there is a potential that the mushroom may interact with the disease state of the patient, or it may interact with the other drugs that the patient is taking. And more evidence of a direct bronchodilator effect of the mushroom is needed because the current research interest they lies on the anti-inflammatory effect of the mushroom. So we have to we need more evidence that it can actually relax the airway smooth muscle and to identify the mechanism of action of the mushrooms. And at the same time, more in vivo data is needed. So most of the studies that I have showed just now, they are being done in animal models. So we need more studies being done in the asthmatic patients to confirm their benefits. And another thing is that we need to identify the bioactive compound. And then there is also a difference in the wild type and also the cultivar mushroom in terms of their chemical compositions. So there's a need for consistency in using the type of mushroom for the research. Okay. So that's a very brief talk from me. So thank you, everyone. So this is my research interest group in the Malaysia. So Dr. Tan Xiao Sing and Ng Su Ting is from Ligno Biotech, who supply me the Lignosus Rhinoceros as well as the Ophiol Cordyceps sinensis for testing in the pharmacological experiments. Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this knowledgeable and informative lecture. Your presentation on the use of medicinal mushroom for airway disease was very well received by our members. Ma'am, we have got some questions from the participants. Shall I proceed?
Yes, sure.
Ma'am, you said there are several medicinal mushrooms that have been used for the hundred of years for the treatment of infection. More recently, they've also been used in the treatment of pulmonary disease. So what are the scopes of medicinal mushroom in the treatment of cancer?
Well, actually, medicinal mushroom has received more attention in treating the cancer. So it has already shown anti-proliferative effect in the in vitro cancer cell lines, and it has shown that it's not cytotoxic towards the normal cell lines. And then it has also been used in clinical trials, especially in China, where there is more use of the medicinal mushroom. So it has been used in the clinical trials to treat the cancer patient, and then it has also shown some positive outcome. So there's yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Ma'am, can medicinal mushrooms have prophylactic or therapeutic effect against COVID-19? Because as you said that research is going on. So is there any evidence or something like that you said?
There have been a few review papers published on the potential of medicinal mushrooms used to treat or prevent the COVID-19, but there's no studies that directly investigate whether these mushrooms can actually treat COVID-19. So there's definitely a need for more studies.
Okay, thank you so very much, ma'am. Any participant who want to put who want to put question to ma'am, so they can type it in chat box and ask. Ma'am, your lecture was very well presented. I don't think so that anyone want to put any question to you. So thank you again, ma'am, for taking the time to speak at our meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Now I call upon my next host, Mrs. Jyoti Negi, for the further proceedings.